You can call me naive or an idealist, because I am Brian Harris, idealistic. But I truly believe that how the world will come to know peace is by individuals coming to be peace. And when we're able to be peace, then we can live that peace out in the world. But I'm not talking about some wimpy, passive peace. I am talking about a peace that is so profound that we refuse to hurt ourselves and each other anymore. A peace that is so big that we refuse to harm Mother Earth anymore. A peace that is so big that we automatically lay down our arms, lay down our defenses, and live in love. I'm talking about a strong, stable, and love-filled peace. That's the peace that we're going to talk about today. Are you with me? So why do I so fervently believe that peace starts here? Many of you know I'm working on my master's degree in consciousness and wisdom studies. And one of the things that we're studying right now in my consciousness class is, it's called systems holism. Brian, you remember? You remember back in the day, systems holism. And basically this means that we live in a world of nested systems. And there are a lot of different ways you can think about this. Think about your body. There's a cell that's in an organ, that's in a system, that's in your body, right? That's a nested system. It goes from smaller to larger. Well, the nested system that I want to talk about today is kind of the grand scheme of things. And basically, it says that this system starts with yourself, and then the greater organism is your family, and then your community, your nation, your ethnicity, your species, the planet, and the cosmos, all of the divine. That's a nested system. And the glorious thing about this idea of nested systems is that when one thing changes in one place in the system, that change ripples out, both upwards and downwards. Okay? Be the change, Darcy Bradley. That's what you taught us. So the mystics and the philosophers teach us that we are at peace when we feel a sense of belonging at each of those levels. Think about that. You have a sense of peace when you feel like you have a sense of belonging in your own skin. You're at peace. You're at peace when you have a sense of belonging in your family, in your community, in your nation. How many of you feel a sense of belonging in your nation today? So this is the kind of peace that we're talking about. It's not just a peace here. It's a peace here that affects everything else. Because tell me, at what level of this grand system do I have the most influence? Here, with myself. That's right. At what level of the system can I initiate change and be the most accountable for having behaviors that meet that change? Here, it's with myself. And the idea of systems holism, again, is that any change at one level automatically affects things at all the levels. So peace here, peace everywhere. So let's talk about this brilliant self for a minute. Did you know that your brain can process 11 million bits of information a second? Your brain, 11 million bits of information a second. But your conscious mind, the part that notices what your brain is doing, that part can only handle 40 to 50 bits of information a second, which still sounds like a lot to me. Like, that's a lot of information coming in, right? But think about that difference between the activity of your brain, that 11 million, and what you're noticing, the 40 bits, right? That's a big difference. And so our brains sometimes take these cognitive shortcuts, and these cognitive shortcuts lead to things like unconscious bias. And these biases that we hold profoundly affect the way we relate to the world and the people in it. So not only do our brains take shortcuts, I promise there's good news coming. I promise. Just stay with me for a few minutes. So not only do our brains take shortcuts with all of the information that's coming at us, but our brains also do this thing where they create structures of knowing around all of this information. Stories, if you will. This event happens, my brain processes this much of it. My conscious brain processes this much of it. But I create a story about what happened. And these stories that we build every minute, we're telling ourselves a story. And when we add all of those stories together, it creates our worldview. We have a natural tendency in ourselves to see the world a certain way. I believe I was born an optimist, and so my brain tends to want to tell stories of hope. I know people who were born pessimists because they felt life had taught them and their ancestors that they needed to be protected, and so they needed to watch for what could go wrong. And so their brains watch for what can go wrong. And that is a natural, I'm here to tell you, a natural way that our brains operate, okay? And it's okay. It's okay. However your brain works is great. But you see, the world is just what the world is. And every single one of us is interpreting it in a different way. Every single one of us has a different worldview and a unique experience. So one of the ways that we heal, one of the things that we talk about here on Sundays and in classes, in our music, and everything we do, is we begin to pay attention to those stories, right? We've talked about this a lot around here. We pay attention to those stories, and our stories show us what needs to be healed. So one way to come to know what your worldview is to pay attention to two things. You can pay attention to your words and your feelings. Because an experience comes along, our brilliant brains do their job of interpreting the information and making a story, and we have a feeling about it. Our words show us what we're feeling. So let me give you an example. Last weekend was Mother's Day, which is actually a pretty tricky one for me. Childhood trauma combined with a commercialized holiday, not my favorite thing. Okay, I'll just let you know right now. So I got up. Faith, you don't have any idea what time I got up on Mother's Day, do you? I got up at 5 a.m. in all my motherhood glory to put Mother's Day lunch in the oven so that when we got home from church, lunch would be ready for us to sit down and celebrate. 5 a.m. Faith. And I may or may not have mentioned this to my family a couple of times over the course of that afternoon. Just a couple. Just a couple, Faith. And eventually, my 13-year-old, as 13-year-olds do, said, "Mom, you feeling salty about getting yourself up and deciding to make your own lunch?" "Well, salty," she said. Thank you, Cadence. I was. I had some salty feelings, and I didn't even know it until my words pointed out the story that I was telling. And once I recognized that I was in a story, I was able to laugh with my family. Some of them may have laughed harder than others. I was able to laugh with my family, shrug it off, and move on with a beautiful day and enjoy my family, right? But I had to recognize that I was in a story in order to make a choice to live from a different place, okay? Here's the thing, though. The work doesn't end there. The work doesn't end there. Later that afternoon, I took some time alone, and I examined within myself, why did I have this story? What is the story? Turns out I was telling quite a beautiful story of maternal sacrifice and love. But I got to do the work of actually digging down and finding out why. Why did I make this a thing? I didn't have to make it a thing. I bet you anything, there are people in here that did not make Mother's Day a thing. I made it a thing, right? And I realized that I had some work to do around mothering and daughtering. I do that work because I'm committed to being at peace. I'm committed to being at peace in my own body, in my own experience, and bringing that peace to my family. If I am living from a place of childhood trauma, then I am bringing unrest to my family. So I wear this bracelet today that my mother gave me, my birth mother, the one who gave me life, but couldn't teach me how to live it. And that's okay. That's okay. So the work continues. I am remembering to be at peace in my body and in my relationship today. And I'm going to remember it again tomorrow and the day after. The work continues, okay? So the message is, the thing I really want you to hear in that story is just pay attention to your words, because they're going to show you what you're feeling, and your feelings are going to show you what story you're believing in that moment, because you have a whole catalog of stories that you can pull from and be believing in any given moment. Another thing that I want you to recognize about this very human tendency of ours to live from our stories is that what we're actually doing is we're living from the meanings that we've made in the past. When we were less mature, when we had less spiritual and emotional understanding, when we had less information about the world. So every belief, every story that we're holding is made of limited thinking, every single one of them. Now, some of y'all have been around for a while and you're thinking to yourself, practitioner Shelley, tell me something I don't already know. We have talked about this before. And so here's what I'm going to ask you with all the love in my heart. How is your piecing going? How are you doing with the activity of peace? When that thing came up with your friend last week, or your coworker, or your family member, or your doctor, or, God help us, your computer. Why do they make me so cranky? Computers, technology, it just... Anyway, when that thing came up, did you take a minute to stop, take a breath, look at the story, see what you were telling yourself about the situation? What was the meaning you were making about that situation? Did you take the time to see where you were dragging your past into this present relationship? Did you take a moment, take a breath, and hold yourself and that other person or that computer in love before you went to confront them? How is your piecing? Are you doing the work? This is why we come to community, to remind ourselves and each other to actually apply the principles in our life. In order to wage peace, we get to be responsible. Responsible for our thoughts, responsible for our feelings, and responsible for our actions. And not a single one of us is going to be perfect at that. But this journey is not about being perfect. It's about shortening the length of time between when you fall out of peace and when you remember. Sometimes it takes longer than others. Spiritual practice teaches us to come back sooner so that we have less ill effect on the world and more good effect on the world. So this idea that peace begins here with me, and that when I choose peace, I affect everything else in my system, my family, my community, my nation, all of it. You with me so far? Okay, good. Because I keep thinking about something that Reverend Shannon said a few months ago that just really dug into me. She has a way of doing that sometimes, doesn't she? She was quoting Byron Katie, and she said, "Defense is the first act of war." Defense is the first act of war. I've been pondering that statement for a while now, and at first I thought, well, if somebody comes at me, shouldn't I defend myself? Like, it's natural human tendency, right? We defend. If you're in actual physical danger, yes, please, get the heck out. Not interested in you trying to be a martyr like I was last Sunday at 5 a.m. But for most of us, for the vast majority of us, what we take offense to, the thing that actually puts us in defense mode, on the defensive, it's not an attack on our physical safety, it's an attack on our very sweet and fragile egos. And our egos are this, fragile is the right word for it, framework of stories and hopes and protections that we have built around ourselves. Our egos actually serve a really high and holy purpose, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. So I had to sit with this idea that defense is the first act of war, because what happens is if I'm feeling unsafe, I start to build my defenses, right? So what happens when we're doing that? I can only speak for myself, so see if you relate to this. First of all, when I find myself in defensive mode, if I really stop and think about it and pull back and notice the noticing, I find that I am assuming that my truth is the truth, and the truth must be defended. Can you relate to that? Yeah. The other thing I'm doing is I'm building a wall around myself, and usually it's a wall of infallible logic. You got that from me, Faith. She's really good at infallible logic. I'm building a wall of infallible logic so that if you come at me, I'm right there with, I've got you, hold on, I've got this, right? I'm preparing myself to battle you. But what I'm actually doing, what this wall actually accomplishes, is it separates me from my finer senses. It separates me from my feelings. It separates me from my divinity. It separates me from my good and from my ability to share that good with you, right? When I'm using, I often, don't tell Katie to watch this talk. I often tell my 13-year-old that I hope she uses her brains for good and not evil. Because some of us are really good at building this case, right? And on my very worst days, not only will I build a case, but I'll go around, hey, Faith, I'm right about this, right? Let me tell you what happened. And let me tell you how right I am. So I can feel even more right. Right? One of my very favorite philosophers and storytellers, and one of the best musicians of all time, Brandi Carlile, said, "But nothing holy comes from being right." Nothing holy comes from being right, y'all. That's not what this is about. Am I loving this other person? It's okay, you can say it. Am I living my stated value of peace? No. Am I prosecuting this person? Yeah, and I'm doing a pretty good job of it. Does it have to be this way? No, it doesn't have to be this way. So listen, look at a fruit tree in the summer. What does it do? It's fruiting, right? That's what it does with its inherent nature. A fruit tree fruits. So I ask you, what are you doing with your inherent nature? Are you loving? Are you gracing? Are you nurturing? Are you peacing? Or are you warring? Peace is not the absence of conflict. We all know that by now. Peace is that thing that we find within in the midst of conflict. So let's talk about conflict for a minute. I have a belief, and some of y'all have heard me talk about this before, but someone asked me to talk about it again. I have this belief that as humans, we basically want the same things. We all want to be safe. We all want to be loved. And we all want to be happy and self-actualized. It's basic humanity. And yes, there are some pathologically ill people who don't want those things, but we're going to set that small number of people aside and talk about the vast majority of us. I don't care what gender you are, what political party you ascribe to. It doesn't matter. We all want to be safe, loved, and happy. We want our children to be safe. We want our schools to be safe. We want our food supplies to be safe. And we have different ways of ideas about how we get there, right? We want to be happy. Yes, it is okay to want to be happy. Did you know that joy is a quality of the divine? It's okay to want to be happy. Happiness is our birthright. We want to be loved. We want to be loved so that we can be at peace in ourselves and feel like we have a sense of belonging with each other. Love is our nature and our birthright. And we want to be self-actualized. And somebody in this room is looking at me right now and saying, Shelley, if you think everybody wants to be self-actualized, I'd like to introduce you to my cousin Joe. There is no self-actualizing happening here. Here's what I'm going to tell you about cousin Joe. Self-actualization simply means the fulfillment of your potential. The fulfillment of your potential. I am not self-actualized, and I'm still pretty lovable. And so is your cousin Joe. Joe's lovable too. And the reason I say all this is because I believe that when we come from a place of understanding that we're working towards the same good, then it's no longer conflict, it's a conversation. And when we're in a conversation, we can open ourselves to a diversity of ideas. Don't you want more ideas about how our children can be safe in school? I do. Aren't you willing to have a conversation about what that could look like? Yes. So conflict doesn't have to be conflict when we recognize that we are looking for the same things. The point I'm making here is that when we can come together and relate to each other from this understanding, then we make room for love to work through us, and we can approach the idea of conflict. We can truly approach it as an opportunity to find shared meaning, an opportunity to create spaces of belonging for each other. And when everybody feels an authentic space of belonging, we're at peace. Done. The natural byproduct of belonging is peace. So leave it to Brené Brown to give us the big truth today. She said, because true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world, our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. Hear this now. To be at peace, to be in a place where we can feel an authentic sense of belonging and extend that belonging out into the world, it requires radical self-acceptance. I believe that we each have a pattern of perfection, like a blueprint in our soul, and that we're built from this blueprint. I believe that this blueprint lives in our souls, but it expresses through our DNA. And our bodies and our minds are always striving to come back into balance and harmony with this perfection that it knows is its inherent nature. Our immune systems are doing that. Our bodies are doing that. Our hearts are always looking to be back in alignment. Always, always. What do you think it would look like if you were able to give up some of those false ideas that you hold about yourself and live from that soul perfection that you are? Let that be the place that you relate to your beloveds from. Let that be the place that you relate to the world from. Not your past, not your triggers, not your beliefs that were based on partial information of past experiences, not your hurts, but your perfect soul. What if you could make your financial decisions from that place of wholeness? What if you could relate to your circle of belonging from that place that can be perfectly vulnerable, because that place that you're coming from, it isn't just safe, y'all. It is safety itself. And you carry it with you, this kind of emotional safety. What if you could relate from that place? What if you could truly love the body that you're in and believe that the universe provided the pattern of perfection that it did for your body, that it's perfect, and that it was created perfectly for your soul's journey. And because of that, it deserves to be cared for. It deserves to be nurtured. It deserves to be loved. What if you could love yourself with a holy kind of love? Born of the understanding that mistakes are just experiences and they're not definitions or descriptions of your worth. Radical self-acceptance is grace. It is that love in action. Radical self-acceptance is nurturing. Because when you have that sense of belonging in your own skin, of accepting yourself in your own skin, then you automatically begin to care for yourself. And then you become truly empowered to care for others. Not from a place of codependency, not from a place of need, but you care out of the overflowing of your love for yourself. Radical self-acceptance is the pathway to peace. Peace in your body, peace in your mind, peace in your relationships, peace in your finances. Peace today, right here, right now. It starts now. Ernest Holmes said that no one can cling to unhappiness and demonstrate peace. No one can cling to unhappiness and demonstrate peace. So I invite you to examine in yourself, are there places in your life where you cling to unhappiness, old stories? Are there places where you're committed to those stories that are only partially true, if true at all, y'all? Are you willing to consider the idea that maybe this old, worn-out story might be ready to retire? We experience peace when we're fully present and when we fully accept ourselves and have a feeling of belonging in our own skin. The interesting thing is that we're also at our most powerful when we are fully present and we accept ourselves. We're able to affect change most efficiently and lovingly in the present moment. Right here, right now. And others feel their own belonging when we are fully present with them. This is the beginning of peace. And yes, it starts here. It starts now.